Hi everyone, I'm the Chima here, and today I'm going to be counting down the top 10 best episodes of Legends of Chima. Let's get started. At number 10, we have The Great Story. Honestly, from the original 90-minute premiere of Legends of Chima, this is probably the only good part about the premiere, which doesn't say much. I mean, the original Legends of Chima episode is still finding its footing, and The Warrior Within, the less we talk about that, the better. The Great Story honestly does a lot in terms of setting up Chima's world, such as their mythology and their culture. In essence, you get the first speeder race scene here, and you just get you finally catch up to what happened with Laval's flashback from the last episode. Chima does a lot of good things right in this one. The animation looks pretty decent, considering it's the second episode in. But a lot of this episode is just focused on laying the groundwork, and that's okay for the second episode in this series. Even if episode 1 was a little on the rocky side, it still held up pretty well. But I think The Great Story did a much, much better job of establishing Chima's world and literally everything behind it. The characters are much more defined here as opposed to when they were mere obnoxious characteristics in the first half of the premiere. But yeah, Great Story is number 10. It's for lack of better terms, great for establishing the character's world. And plus, I could watch Laval kick Chi up and roundhouse kick Krieger all day. So that's why it's probably number 10 best. At number 9, we come to the Joyride. Joyride is the 4th episode into this series, and it's the first one that aired after the premiere, in case you haven't figured that out yet. And the Joyride it's essentially a really fun episode. It's really laid back, which coming off the premiere would seem like kind of a lazy way to go about it, but really Joyride pulls it off very well. It's a nice little story about Laval and Eris taking a road trip and the shenanigans that ensue. A lot of this episode focuses on it's more world building as you get to see more of Chima's world, such as the Shadow Hills and the Spiral Mountain. I will agree with Laval's dad when he says it's the best sunset in all of Chima, and like Eris, I'm not going to argue. This episode also introduced the beavers. This is probably their only good episode. I apologize for those that love the beavers. I really can't stand them after this episode, but I will be fair and give them that since this episode is their introduction, I'm going to let them off the hook. The dam fight with Krieger at the end? No, I did not swear. I said D-A-M, as in Beaver Dam. But yes, that fight with Krieger and Laval it's actually very well done, and the lighting looks great. The chi water reflecting off the swords and fur. It's just really amazing. And the payoff at the end is super hilarious. I'm not going to spoil anything more for you there. You'll have to go online and find the episode yourself. But I do think I put Joyride at number 9 simply because it's a fun, and because it was also the first episode after the premiere. So I felt justified in giving this the number 9 spot. I can understand why people would put it higher, but there's better episodes of Chima, and this is only episode 4. At number 8, we have Fake Chi, Real Trouble. This episode concluded a multi-episode arc regarding the wolves taking Chi, and this episode, I put this one above Joyride mostly because this episode would serve as the conclusion, and oh boy did this conclusion pay off pretty well. Basic premise is, since the wolves are still stealing Chi and Laval and company is still trying to get the Chi out to the other tribes, they're having trouble with that, and Krieger, who's recently been freed from the Crocs, or not the Crocs, he's a Croc. Krieger, he and his tribe were recently held captive by the wolves. Krieger wants to do something nice, so he decides to give everybody a gift. Well, Crueler, being the backstabber she is, gives Krieger fake chi. It's from a raven called Regal. It's Regal's Sheagle, I guess. Basically, it works the same way as normal chi until it burns out, and then everybody starts squawking like birds. Regal wants to use this as mind control, but it's really not great mind control. So now Krieger's in a race to keep up and to recover all the stolen orbs, And Laval, on the other hand, is trying to figure out why the heck Krager would be doing something like this, and what's the name of the game. This episode's got a lot of back and forth kind of movement, and a lot of quips are dropped in this one. My favorite is the Longtooth / Wolf one, when the wolf growls, "Will you stop that?" And Longtooth's just like, "Okay bro, whatever," and he breaks the tank. It's a lot of fun. I will admit the idea of turning people into birds was okay. Probably not the best idea they could come up with. But it works very well for Regal. And the final battle with the wolves, borderline perfection. I love it. This is very similar to the Joyride when the payoff pays off. Literally amazing. I put this one above Joyride mostly because this one serves as a conclusion, but also because I felt that the stake that this episode had its more funny moments as opposed to the Joyride. And that's why I think Fake Tree Real Trouble, it's a really decent episode. Again, there's still better episodes out there, but we're only at number 8. Number 6, Chima Falls. This episode is the penultimate episode, one of the series, and Chima went bold a bit with the penultimate series. That dramatic reveal of the tribes gasping as their chi runs dry. Holy shoot. That's when everybody does a uh-oh, now what? And then the Crocs then Krager takes one look at Laval and says, "Nice job breaking it, hero." So this puts the tribes back into the battle mode. And while Eris races to have the beavers fix Mount Cavor in a way, Laval sets out trying to gather allies because Krager's going to come barreling down with his own. And it's going to be a big bloody battle if Krager's leading, at least in Laval's mind. This episode does a lot right for a penultimate episode. Looking at you, Wings of Fire, you trash pile. And there's a lot of movement in this episode, starting immediately from the blasters to the blast shots at the beginning when they're shooting down the black cloud, to when Laval and Eris literally run toward the camera pursued by Crocs. There's a lot of fast-paced movement that happens in this episode. Not a lot of slow moments, which is okay because since we're gearing up for the big battle at the end, it's not meant to be slow. You can definitely tell that the momentum from the previous episode is spilling over into this episode, and it's just gonna keep building and building until it ends in one big finish. Again, I did of the final 3 episodes of season 1. I will say this is probably their iffiest one. And the season finale is, well, the season finale. Nobody touches that. And I actually enjoyed the previous episode a little bit more than I did Chima Falls. Also, I will say that Chima Falls is definitely one of the best episodes of the series. But I found a couple of episodes that I thought were a tad bit better. The number 7 spot finds Attack on Eagle Spire. This episode I think was the first real battle Chima had outside of the fights we saw at the Lion Temple. Well, no, we will not include the dam fight, or we will not include the Raven Scuffle with the Speeder, because one, the fight on the dam was technically near the Lion Temple, so I'll include it. And the Speeder fight wasn't really so much of a fight as much as it was more of a confrontation. So this brings us to Attack on Eagle Spire. It's episode 6, and basically Crueler gets the Crocs get the wolves into a stir crazy, so the wolves attack the eagles. Eagles call for the lions to help. Crocs plan to yank down the spires. It's a big convoluted mess, let's just say. Like I said, this episode was probably the first real battle outside of the in Chima, outside the Lion Temple area. And the idea of attacking on the Eagle Spire when everything's literally crashing down around you was actually very genius. I'm impressed that the Chima people decided to pull this kind of stunt very early in the series. It's a good sign. especially since it's only the 6th episode in. You can easily see by this point Chima and people have kind of found their footing, especially in terms of combat. And the fight scenes are very well stylized and choreographed, and it looks like you're actually. And if you were standing right there, you could probably see that it looked like a very realistic battle with swords. This episode's got the occasional back and forth quip, and a lot of screen time is spent focused on the wolves, which is a good thing because the wolves become important later on in the series. And that opening shot when they pan all over the Eagle Spire is just gorgeous. I love it. But yeah, I put up Attack on Eagle Spire right here because yes, it's still fairly early on in the series, but you can definitely tell Chima is fighting its ground, and it's just going to get better and better from here. Number 5, Foxtrot. Foxtrot is essentially the episode that started multi-episode mini arcs in a fun way. Foxtrot is episode 10, and basically Crueler deciding her brother is absolute trash and can't do squat makes a deal with the wolves. Wolves sabotage race. Crueler will destroy the peace treaty that the wolves have. Wolves get all the chi they want. Crocs decide not to touch him. So the wolves are like, yeah, sure, whatever. So they get Freddy the Fox, literally one of the most annoying characters. Sorry, Freddy fans, he's in the same category as the Beavers. Thank God he only appears in one episode. Anyway, the wolves hire somebody to help start the race. Racers get into a literal Smash Brothers style brawl. Shadowwind makes a nice comeback, yay! And he wins, and Lagavis basically he hands him the golden cheese, and he tells Longtooth, okay, look, we got our full-blown ride, shut it down now. This gives the wolves the opportunity to sneak in, swipe a whole bunch of chi. Krieger and Lavelle get into a fight with Juarez. Rogan, for some reason, has a crush on Eris. Sorry, Aragon fans, that's just the most awkwardly forged ship I've ever seen in my life. So he ends up taking a bullet to save Eris, and the wolves get away with the chi. That's pretty much a basic rundown of the episode. This episode is also very fast-paced, and while it's I will say it's a tad slower than Chima Falls, I just found Foxtrot more enjoyable. There's just something funny about watching the tribes of Chima get into a full-blown Smash Brothers style. You literally see characters grabbing. If you look in the crowd hard enough, you can literally see somebody grab a Croc and swing him by his tail. It's pretty funny. Yeah. And in some of the shots, and the lions are coming out to push the guards, to push the men back, the spectators back. Some of them are like, "Oh, okay, let's go." And yeah, this episode's kind of really started the multi-part arc that you would see happen again in 16 and 18 to some extent. And yes, this episode also brought back Shadowwind. Shadowwind, you rock, dude. You are so amazing. And it's also worth noting that this kind of seems like the first battle where the lions actually lose the fight. Up until this point, they and their allies have been winning all the time, so to have the lions lose this battle to the wolves it gives it a more realistic feel. It kind of reminds the audience that, hey, just because the lions win most of the battles doesn't mean they have to win. They win every single one of them. And Lavalle's choice clearly reflects that. He could have, at the end there, he had the choice between the Chi and Krieger, and he went after Krieger for the sake of his best friend. And later, when he says, "I could have stopped them," Lagavis tells Lavelle, "Hey, you did the right thing anyway. You saved Krieger. Tells you how much life's more important than chi, people. Let's remember that." But anyway, this episode was just I really enjoyed this episode a lot more than Chima Falls. And while the next episode 11 is my favorite, I'm gonna give that I'm actually going to give that as an honorable mention because, yeah, this episode had the same amount. It just carried over. I love it. I just love Foxtrot too. And that's why I put it at number 5. Number 4, Reunion Gone Wrong. Oh jeez, this episode. Oh my Kafora, does this episode have a lot to carry. This episode came in about shortly after the end of the Wolf arc, and after the little hiccup that was 15 that we don't speak of. 16 comes in, and it does a lot. I know I've talked about 16 on my top 5 favorite episodes of Chima, so I'll try to keep this brief. Basically, this episode is them trying to sign a peace treaty, Crueler sabotages the whole mess, and Laval has to go to extreme lengths to save the day. This episode does a lot in terms of previously, this episode does do a lot in terms for Laval's character, as he seems to kind of mature a little bit over the course of this episode. At the beginning, he's all like, "Oh yeah, whatever, we got this peace treaty," and by the end of the episode, he's like, "Hey, look, this is my destiny. This is what I have to do. I'm gonna do it." It may seem kind of fast, but if you consider what happened, where Laval started, especially at the beginning of season 1, when he's literally a cocky, sort of arrogant, no offense, prick, you actually can see a little bit of maturity in Laval by the time 16 rolls around, and by the time the season 1 finale rolls around too, there's a lot more of that. But yeah, this episode does a lot of stuff right. The Fog of Destiny, the Power Warriors, I can see why LEGO made those Chi buildable figures, because they would use them in this episode, with a more uniform color scheme. But they're there. Here, don't say I didn't tell you. And this episode does pack a lot of emotional punches. Literally, all the healing and stuff that Krieger and Laval's relationship went through since about episode 10, literally shot to pieces in this episode. Breaks my heart. Every time. But yeah, that's what I did think there's still a couple more episodes that I thought were better than Reunion Gone Wrong. But for the start of an arc, you can't get much better than that. Or you can't get much better than this. Number 3, The Black Cloud. This one is the start of the final act of season 1. And this episode does what is very similar to Reunion Gone Wrong, except this one I felt was a bit stronger in terms of combat. While Reunion Gone Wrong's balance focuses on tugs at your emotion and your heartstrings, this episode just basically gets you right back into the swing of things. We immediately start with Krieger waking up from a nightmare, and he's pretty much livid, and that's when the tribes notice the Black Cloud. Laval and Eris decide to investigate, which leads to a couple of shenanigans, including one of getting launched into the gorilla forest. The Ravens decide to try to sell the Black Cloud, and this ends hilariously. And Krieger decides to seek out Plovar, because supposedly Plovar knows Shadowin, and Shadowin supposedly knows where Krieger's parents are. So this episode turns into a full-blown hilarious quest, at least in terms of Krieger's perspective. It ends with Krieger and Laval butting heads at the creek, and when the Black Cloud comes back, Laval gets the brilliant idea to shoot it down. Even Legraus can't believe this idea. It sounds ridiculous, and yet in Laval's mind, it totally works. It does appear to be alive somehow, and if it's alive, it can be attacked. So yeah, let's blast it! That's a pretty solid logic, Laval. I mean, I can't argue with that, really. Because it is true, if something is alive, it can be attacked. So Laval rounds up all the tribes blasted the Black Cloud, it goes away, and everyone celebrates, but not all is well, as the falls start drying up one by one. This episode was just was definitely more fun in terms of what I was watching, whereas Reunion Gone Wrong, I felt like I should have at least one tissue box nearby, and the humor in Reunion Gone Wrong was kind of forced. This episode's humor kind of relies on the characters' personalities, especially between Krager and Plovar. Krager, who's being an absolute jerk, having to take orders from Plovar, who's actually kind of gotten to be a bit of a snub over the seasons. I mean, in the first couple of episodes he was fine. I mean, he wasn't annoyed or anything like that, but since 17, he's kind of been a jerk. Yep. As much of a jerk as Krager, and where Krager's kind of softened up a little bit, Plovar's kind of done the opposite. He's kind of gotten a little bit harder, which is okay, I guess. But anyway, this episode is amazing, and it's a great start to the final 3 episodes of Chima. Number 2, Laval in Exile. Oh mama, the last time I watched this episode, I actually cried at the beginning and at the end. I forgot how much of an emotional impact this episode was. This episode takes a lot of the momentum from the previous episode, Reunion Gone Wrong, and converts it into emotional energy and then slams you right in the face. Finley's song Horizon kind of nails the coffin into this episode, as this episode focuses on Laval actually going into exile, and the Crocs be like, "Hot dog, he's in exile, can't touch." No, we get the king, there's literally nothing the Lions can do. So that's exactly what they do. They capture King Legravis, and Laval has to come rescue him, but with the situation, he's in exile. The reason this is number 2 is actually not for the sake of Laval's story. It's kind of annoying after the first few minutes or so, because Laval's interactions with Skinnett and Plovar, I swear, those guys will not leave him alone. If I had a nickel for every time I wanted to sock those guys every time they were on screen harassing Laval, I probably would have had at least $10. This episode actually goes higher than the number 2 spot, mostly because of the focus on Legravis. You can actually see the emotional impact Laval's exile has on him. He's even willing, he totally falls into Krager's trap just simply because it's Laval. And kind of the bond between parent and child is a big thing at play here, as not only do you see the Lion Royals interacting while Laval's in exile, with Laval's exile, you also get to see Kruler's backstory, and Kruler gets an interesting backstory. She's the oldest child, so the wiki page is totally wrong. But Kruler was shunned because since Krager survived they really thought he was going to die, they decided to name him king, leaving Kruler to sit on the sidelines. It's kind of similar-ish, I guess, to Cassandra's story in Tangled the series, and you Tangled the series fans can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but Kruler never had the chance that Krager was given. She's felt denied her whole life, and now Kruler, when her is taking revenge by controlling Krager via her persuader plan, and then when she finally lost control, she's pretty much done. And the episode does end happily. I mean, we just talked about the black cloud with Laval and Ares going at it, so we know Laval comes back. But still, the payoff for this episode is a very strong one, as you actually a rare role reversal. Laval and very similar to the last episode, where Laval and Legravis are both kind of arguing over the rules. In this one, Legravis Laval's I'm still in exile. You can't take me back. And Legravis is like, Laval, if the Crocs are planning that, gonna have a big attack, we need every able-bodied warrior we can get, and we need you back. You almost get the feeling that it's not that although Legravis appears to be asking Laval back as a warrior, you kind of get the feeling you're asking him back as family. Yeah. Here's and as you learn that Laval put Legravis put Lavertus into exile, you'll learn that it was hard enough putting Lavertus into exile, and Lavertus didn't come back until later. So the fact that Laval's here, and Legravis has the opportunity to take Laval back, better believe Legravis is not going to pass it up. And Laval knows that too, as he does just say he's going to come back. But he does say he still deserves his exile, and I do note throughout the rest of the series that This exile is only brought up once, which really surprises me, but I suspect in fanfic, in between the episodes, the Lions, or between seasons 1 and 2, before the Chima heroes headed into the Outlands, the Lions and the tribes met together, and they appealed and annulled Laval's exile so he could stay, which actually would make a lot of sense, considering that the tribes are at peace at this point. But I digress big time. Laval in Exile is literally the second best episode of the series, and there's no denying that. Before we do number 1, I would like to give one quick honorable mention, and that is to the Chi Jackers. It's literally not. I'm gonna keep this one brief because this one is my favorite episode, and I have talked about it before. But this episode does have a lot of the same qualities that Chima Falls has after the Black Cloud. This one is very similar, in the sense that it carries the momentum over from Foxtrot to this episode. This episode has a couple of some intent, is very evenly balanced. The only reason I left it off this list was because while it's great, it's a really solid episode. I did find Chima. I do note that Chima Falls definitely had a better quality, but it's to be expected from the penultimate episode. So I left Chima Falls off. So I left Chi Jackers off this list. And with that said, let's do number 1. Oh, Kavora, who could not have seen this episode coming? The season 1 finale is literally the best episode in all of season 1. Carrying its momentum from 2 episodes beforehand and then ramping it up to a solid 11, complete with a balanced emotional moment. This episode is the full package. I've talked about this episode before on my list of favorite Chima episodes, so I will try and keep this one brief. But basically, this one is the final battle of season 1. Cheese dry on both sides, and it's a no-holds-back kind of fight. Literally, Laval's cape gets shredded in this one, and characters quote-unquote die. So, but still, this episode is very strong. This is a very strong finale. I was floored by this finale. The second, because remember, the first time I watched it, I had no impact. But the second time I watched it, and the third, and literally every time I've watched it, I just get kind of, right there, it kind of hurts you when you watch this episode, because this episode's literally lays everything on the line. And it's a really strong end to season 1, and here was to hoping that season 2 would have ended a heck of a lot better than this one, but nope, sorry. Anyway, this episode is golden. Let's just be real. Season 1 on finale is the best episode of season 1. So those were, that was my opinion of the top 10 best Chima episodes. If there's a particular episode I think I've missed, or if there's one that you think should have been on there, please let me know in the comment section below. Have an awesome day, everyone. And oh yeah, hey! Happy Easter on behalf of my channel and my Chima people, I guess. Take care, have an awesome day, and have a very, very happy Easter. Lord's blessings to you all.